The moment the next act was announced, the audience collectively leaned forward, almost as if they could feel something extraordinary about to unfold. "You're not going to believe this," the host exclaimed, his voice trembling with excitement, and the camera zoomed in on the judges' faces, capturing the subtle mix of curiosity and skepticism. The lights dimmed, leaving only a narrow spotlight on the entrance. Then, as if from nowhere, a young Filipino man appeared, walking slowly toward the stage with a calm confidence that contrasted sharply with the restless murmurs of the crowd. He wore a sleek black leather jacket, perfectly tailored, paired with tight dark jeans and shiny shoes that reflected the stage lights. His hair was slicked back, immaculately styled, and his eyes, bright, intense, and determined, locked onto the judges with an unwavering focus. From the very first step, it was clear this was no ordinary audition. The audience felt it in their bones, and the judges sensed it instantly. Whispers erupted. "Is that Elvis?" someone murmured, barely audible but enough to spark a ripple of speculation across the room. The judges exchanged glances. Simon Cowell raised one eyebrow, that famous skeptical look etched across his face, while Howie Mandel tilted his head, trying to decipher whether this was a clever gimmick or something genuinely remarkable. Heidi Klum pressed her lips together, betraying a hint of curiosity beneath her poised exterior, and Sofia Vergara, seated elegantly in her chair, leaned slightly forward, the gleam of anticipation in her eyes unmistakable. As the young performer drew closer, he paused at the edge of the stage, scanning the audience. There was a brief silence, so complete that the faintest cough echoed like thunder in the room. He adjusted the microphone stand with a small, deliberate movement, his fingers brushing the metal in a way that suggested both nervousness and practiced control. For a moment, he simply stood there, letting the tension build. Every eye in the theater followed his every motion, from the subtle tightening of his jaw to the slight sway of his shoulders. This pause was electric, a deliberate tease that held the audience in suspended disbelief. The host's voice returned, barely above a whisper. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves." Then came the first hint of sound, a faint strum of a guitar. It was gentle, almost teasing, but it immediately drew gasps. The audience sat up straighter, instinctively holding their breath. The judges leaned forward, senses sharpened, trying to catch even the smallest detail, and then, with a sudden, confident step forward, he began to sing. The first note hit the air like a bolt of lightning. The sound was rich, warm, and startlingly authentic, channeling the unmistakable essence of Elvis Presley. Yet there was something entirely new in it, an energy that was uniquely his own. The room froze. Even the cameras seemed to pause in midair to capture the moment. The young man's posture was perfect, the way he held the mic, the subtle nod of his head with each note, all calculated yet effortless. The audience's eyes widened as they tried to reconcile what they were hearing with what they were seeing. This was Elvis, but not Elvis. The voice carried a depth and maturity beyond his years, a resonance that filled every corner of the auditorium. He hit the notes with precision, but it wasn't mechanical. There was emotion behind every syllable, a story woven into every word. As he continued, small movements began to emerge, a tilt of the head, a flick of the wrist, a soft sway of the hips, homages to the king of rock and roll that were executed with reverence and charisma. Some in the audience gasped audibly, unable to contain their excitement, while others sat frozen, mesmerized, unsure whether they were witnessing a masterful impersonation or an entirely new star being born before their eyes. The judges' reactions were priceless. Howie's mouth fell open, Simon's eyes widened, and Heidi's fingers instinctively went to her lips as if to stifle an exclamation. Sophia's hand rose slightly, gripping the armrest, her expression caught between delight and disbelief. Every step the performer took on the stage seemed deliberate, commanding attention without demanding it. He paced slightly, adjusting his stance, letting the light fall across his face to emphasize the emotion in his performance. His confidence was magnetic. It drew every gaze, every ear, every pulse in the room toward him. The faintest smile flickered across his lips, not arrogance, but an acknowledgement of the power of the moment he was creating. The audience leaned in closer, collectively sensing that they were on the precipice of witnessing something extraordinary. Then came a shift in energy. He moved closer to the edge of the stage, almost daring the audience to react. The room's atmosphere changed from curiosity to anticipation, an almost tangible electricity that made the air hum. Murmurs turned into whispers of excitement. "This kid, he's incredible. I've never seen anything like this. Is this real?" Cameras panned across the crowd, catching glimpses of tears in the eyes of older audience members, smiles of awe from teens, and mouths agape in pure disbelief from the front rows. As the first verse approached its climax, the performer took a deep breath, and his eyes swept the room, locking for a breath. Instant with each of the judges. There was a silent communication, a challenge almost. He dared them to doubt him, dared them to withhold their judgment, dared them to resist the inevitable awe. Every movement, every nuance of his posture was infused with confidence and humility simultaneously, a rare combination that left everyone captivated. The strum of the guitar grew bolder, louder, complementing his voice perfectly. Each note resonated with clarity and power, filling the auditorium like a wave crashing over the audience. By the time he finished the opening segment, the room erupted into stunned applause, not the polite clapping typical of auditions, but an immediate, visceral reaction from a crowd that had just witnessed something historic. Phones were raised mid-air, cameras flashed, and a wave of cheers rippled through the theater. The judges were visibly shaken. Simon sat back slightly, running a hand down his face, unable to hide the astonishment. Heidi wiped a tear discreetly from her eye. Howie laughed in disbelief, shaking his head as if to confirm this was real. Sophia leaned forward, her expression radiant with excitement, capturing the perfect balance of shock and admiration. The young Filipino Elvis had done it. He had captured the essence of a legend, added his own spark, and left everyone, including the judges, the audience, and the millions watching at home, completely stunned. The stage was alive, the spotlight fixed firmly on him, and the entire auditor. Iam seemed to pulse with the energy of what was about to unfold next. Every eye was on him, every heart raced in anticipation, and the whispering rumors that had begun at his entrance had transformed into a unanimous thought echoing through the theater. This was no ordinary audition. This was history in the making. The moment his voice filled the auditorium, it was as if time itself had stopped. Every eye was glued to him, every ear straining to capture the sound, and every heartbeat in the audience seemed to synchronize with his first note. It wasn't just a note, it was a declaration. Rich, velvety, and electrifying, it carried the unmistakable essence of Elvis Presley, yet something about it felt completely alive, completely new, and utterly mesmerizing. A hush fell over the audience. No coughing, no shifting in seats, not even a rustle of programs, just pure, undisturbed attention. The young Filipino Elvis didn't just sing, he commanded. His body moved subtly, in rhythm with the music, each gesture intentional but effortless. His fingers caressed the microphone, his posture rigid with focus yet relaxed enough to radiate confidence. The lights above the stage seemed to bend around him, illuminating his face and hands with a halo of brilliance. The camera captured every detail, the slight twitch of an eyebrow, the flare of nostrils, the tiniest curl of a lip as he delivered a note perfectly. The judge's initial skepticism had vanished entirely, replaced by a kind of disbelief, too. Hat bordered on awe. Simon Cowell's lips parted slightly, his usual composure shaken, while Heidi Klum's hands went instinctively to her face, her eyes wide. Howie Mandel's mouth hung open, and Sofia Vergara's gaze was fixed, transfixed, as though she couldn't look away even if she wanted to. With each passing second, the performance grew more intense. The first verse was carefully measured, delicate yet powerful, teasing the audience with hints of what was to come. Then came the chorus. He hit the high note, a crystal-clear, electrifying sound that echoed through the theater, and the crowd gasped. Phones were whipped out, cameras flashed, and for a split second it felt as if the world outside had disappeared. There was only him, the stage, and the unstoppable force of his voice. Tweets and live streams would later claim this moment as the instant the internet broke, but for those in the auditorium, it was something even more immediate. Raw, breathtaking, impossible to ignore talent. The young man didn't just replicate Elvis, he infused the performance with his own soul. Every note carried emotion, joy, nostalgia, longing, and sheer exhilaration. The subtle vibrato, the slight pauses, the almost imperceptible shifts in tone, all of it combined to create something that felt both classic and groundbreaking. The audience leaned forward, unable to resist the pull of the music. Parents whispered to their children, "Listen, really listen," while teens clutched their phones in disbelief, already recording history. The judges' reactions intensified with every measure. Simon's sharp eyes glimmered with incredulity. He tapped the armrest as if physically trying to process what he was hearing. Heidi's smile had transformed into an expression of wonder, tears threatening to spill over. Howie's hands flew into the air mid-clap, laughter and excitement mingling on his face. Sophia's jaw had dropped so completely that the camera caught it in multiple angles, a perfect reaction shot destined for viral GIFs. Every subtle facial expression told the story. This was not merely talent, it was a revelation. Then came the bridge, a moment when most performers falter, when nerves or fatigue creep in. But he was unstoppable. His voice soared, stretching across octaves effortlessly, delivering emotion with precision and power. The crowd responded instantly. People stood, clapping and cheering mid-performance, unable to contain themselves. Some wept openly, caught in the sheer beauty of the moment. Others shouted encouragements, "Yes! Keep going! This is insane!" The energy in the theater became electric, a live wire that seemed to crackle through the air. The young Filipino Elvis added subtle movements, paying homage to the king of rock and roll without ever descending into imitation. A hip sway here, a dramatic hand gesture there, each perfectly timed with the beat of the music. He connected with the audience effortlessly, making eye contact with those closest to his stage, scanning the crowd as if to invite them into the story he was telling. This wasn't performance, it was storytelling. It was raw, human, and unforgettable. Halfway through the final chorus, the room reached fever pitch. The camera panned across the audience, capturing the spectrum of reactions. Jaws dropped, hands clapping so hard they echoed, tears streaked down faces, and mouths moved in silent astonishment. The energy was palpable, as if the entire theater had become a single organism reacting in perfect synchrony to the music. Phones floated above heads, capturing every second, every note, every expression, destined to be shared across the globe. And then came the crescendo. He hit a note so high, so clear, so impossibly perfect that it sent shivers down every spine in the auditorium. The audience's collective gasp was almost a physical sound, followed immediately by deafening applause, screams, and cheers. It was a wave of pure human reaction, raw and uncontrollable. Judges jumped to their feet, clapping, shouting, and laughing in disbelief. Simon pressed his fingers to his lips, muttering, I can't believe this." Heidi sobbed openly, her hands shaking. Howie clapped so hard his chair nearly toppled. Sophia laughed, tears streaming, her expression the perfect mix of shock and admiration. The young performer, though sweating and breathing heavily, remained composed. He took a small bow, letting the applause wash over him, acknowledging the moment without arrogance, his eyes shining with pride and gratitude. The audience roared again, this time a sustained, unified response that seemed to go on forever. He had done more than sing, he had captured hearts, minds, and imaginations. The moment was electric, almost mythical in intensity, and the world beyond the theater would soon catch up, exploding across social media as clips of his voice went viral within seconds. By the time the last note faded, the energy in the room hadn't diminished. People were on their feet, cheering, shouting, and clapping. The judges, still stunned, shared glances that spoke louder than words. This young man had changed the game entirely. The Filipino Elvis had arrived, not just as a singer, but as a phenomenon, leaving everyone in the theater certain that they had witnessed the kind of performance people would talk about for decades. The final note still echoed faintly through the auditorium when the entire audience erupted in a roar so loud it felt like the walls themselves trembled. It wasn't applause. It was an explosion, a surge of sound that hit the performer like a physical force. He froze for a moment, chest rising and falling, staring out at the sea of people on their feet, their faces lit with awe, disbelief, and raw excitement. It was the sound of victory, of history, of something so powerful unfolding in real time that nobody wanted to blink. The judges were the first to move. Howie Mandel shot up from his seat so fast his chair spun behind him. He clapped with both hands high in the air, shaking his head in utter shock. Heidi Klum covered her mouth with trembling fingers, tears spilling down her cheeks, happy tears, overwhelmed tears, the kind that come from witnessing something so beautiful your heart can't hold it all in. Sofia Vergara leaned forward, one hand pressed to her chest, the other gripping the table as if grounding herself. She looked like she had just witnessed a miracle. And Simon Cowell, he didn't move at first. He sat completely still, staring at the young Filipino Elvis with eyes wide open, his expression unreadable. The audience watched him, waiting, holding their breath again, because whenever Simon goes quiet, really quiet, something massive is about to happen. The performer finally exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping his lips as he scanned the roaring room. He brought a hand to his heart, nodding gratefully as the cheers intensified. He lifted the microphone to speak, but every time he opened his mouth, the audience screamed louder. They didn't want him to talk yet. They wanted to celebrate him. The host rushed up beside him, nearly shouting over the noise, "What just happened?" Even the host looked overwhelmed, eyes wide, hands on his head, pacing in circles like he had just witnessed a UFO landing. The lights swept across the crowd, teens crying into their phones, older fans shaking their heads as if they couldn't believe they were hearing such a voice again, couples hugging, children holding up homemade signs covered in glitter with "Go Filipino Elvis." "And you're the king now," scribbled proudly across them. Backstage crew members had stopped working completely, all lined up along the curtain, watching the stage with stunned expressions. Even cameramen were caught on screen mouthing, "Oh my God." The performer finally managed a sentence. Thank you so much," he said, voice trembling with emotion. His accent, gentle and warm, melted the hearts of everyone in the room. "This is a dream I never thought would happen to someone like me." That line sent a ripple of emotion through the crowd. Someone in the front row shouted, "You deserve IT!" Another yelled, "Icon!" It felt like entire rows wanted to run up on stage to hug him. Simon Cowell stood. The crowd saw it, screamed louder, and the camera zoomed in instantly. His expression shifted. Gone was the skepticism, the reserved critique. His eyes softened in a way so rare that the audience leaned forward collectively to catch every second. Simon cleared his throat. "I'm going to be honest with you," he said slowly. "When you walked out here dressed like Elvis, I thought, here we go a guy." N. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Even the performer laughed nervously. "But then," Simon continued, pointing at him, "you opened your mouth. And the moment you sang your first note, I knew we were witnessing something extraordinary." The audience roared again. "That wasn't an impression," Simon said. "That wasn't a tribute. That was you, bringing something magical back to life. And I don't say this lightly. I felt chills, real, genuine chills." Heidi nodded vigorously, wiping her eyes. Sofia clapped her hands together softly, still emotional. Howie looked at Simon as if waiting for him to finish, because something bigger was coming. Simon rested his hands on the judging table. His face softened even further. "You didn't just sound like Elvis. You reminded us of what it feels like to witness a once-in-a-generation talent. And America is going to fall in love with you. The world is going to fall in love with you." The audience erupted again, drowning out his words. The performer's eyes filled with tears. His chest heaved as he tried to process what he was hearing. His mother, seated in the audience with her hand over her mouth, was crying uncontrollably, shaking with pride. Then Simon stood up straight and reached out his hand toward the golden buzzer. The crowd exploded, screaming, jumping, people waving their arms wildly. The host jumped backward like he'd been shocked by lightning. "No way! He's doing it!" "Do I tee, Simon?" rang through the theater. The Filipino Elvis stared, frozen, tears beginning to spill down his cheeks. Simon pressed the golden buzzer. The world slowed to a cinematic halt. Then boom! A massive burst of golden light shot downward, covering the stage in shimmering, cascading confetti. The audience screamed so loud the microphones peaked. The performer broke, his legs gave out, and he fell to his knees as golden flakes rained down around him. His mother sobbed harder, hands shaking as she tried to record the moment. The host knelt beside him, pulling him into a hug, shouting happily in his ear, but the sound was lost under the roar of the crowd. The judges stood, clapping, cheering, some crying. Heidi spun around in circles, letting the confetti fall on her. Howie pounded the table in excitement. Sofia blew kisses toward the stage, tears streaming down her face. The stage looked like a dream, Gold everywhere, confetti swirling through the lights, the performer kneeling, overwhelmed, hands pressed to his face as tears dripped through his fingers. Simon walked onto the stage, something he almost never does outside of the finals. He approached the young singer, placing a hand on his shoulder. The performer looked up, eyes full of disbelief and gratitude. "You deserve this," Simon said gently. The audience screamed again, louder than ever. As the confetti continued to fall, cameras captured the moment from every angle, shots that would soon dominate social media, news headlines, reaction videos, and international fandom pages. Clips of him singing, crying, kneeling in gold would go viral within minutes. Hashtags were already exploding. For Filipino Elvis, brag golden buzzer, broke the internet bar. The world didn't just witness a performance. They witnessed the birth of a superstar. And the young Filipino Elvis stood there, glittering in gold, crying, smiling, shaking as America gasped. Because they knew they had just watched history.